thank you. I felt welcome. And it's been fun. I walked around downtown last night. It was a good time, and I expect it to continue. So thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here speaking with you all. I've been invited to come to speak about my book, What They Don't Teach Teens. And I've put copies, about 10 copies throughout, so you guys can just take a look through it, see if it's something that resonates with you. Please leave them after the presentation, so I have them for my next session. Also, the conference bought 5 of the books, and I'm supposed to give those away, so y'all are going to have to help me find a way to give them away at the end of the presentation, so don't let me forget. So when the conference organizers looked through my book and reached out to me, there's a whole lot of information in the book, which I'll be telling you obviously more about. They asked me to zero in on part 2 of my book, which is on healthy, intimate relationships and connections. If you look through the book in part 2, I actually call it sexual violence and misconduct. But I've toned it down since then, something more mild. Now, most of the presentation you're going to see is what I'm almost identical to what I give to students, parents, teachers, folks who are working in the fields that you are. So the content is very, very similar. So in the limited time I have with you, I'm going to be talking about 3 parts of my book. One is on teen dating violence. The other is about online sexual blackmail material called sextortion. And then finally, sexual harassment in a school environment. But before I get into all of that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Carrie, thank you for the introduction. Just give you a few details. Speaking to all of you and others like you is not my day job. My day job for 23 years, it has been as a prosecutor for the city of Los Angeles. I love that job. It's been a wonderful career for me. But enforcing laws today is something that I never thought I'd be doing, because when I was a teenager, I was disregarding a few laws. I was a good kid. I got pivoted off path and started doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And those were really hard times for me, emotionally, physically, in so many ways. I wouldn't go back, but I'd be tempted to go back for my hair, because I do this. Also, I do a lot of teaching in LA County on sexual violence prevention, but the number one most important thing to know about me is that I'm a father to 3 monsters. There I am with my 3 sons. So why do I put them in costumes? Because they don't want their faces in my presentations. And they've made it very clear, because I also teach at their schools. But anyway, my wife Lisa and I believe that our 3 sons needed more education than what they were typically going to get in school. Of course, English, math, history, science, all those really, really important topics. But they also needed to learn information that would definitely help them outside of school. And these, some of the topics you can see on the cover of my book, and also as it goes around. So I didn't want to write this book, but I wanted to teach my own sons about the topics we're going to talk about and so much more. There was no book. So my wife, Lisa, said, write the book you're looking for. And like a good husband, I listened to my wife. And I'm really glad I did. It was a 5-year, well, it wasn't a labor of love, it was a labor. It was very difficult, but I'm glad I finished up, and it's been well received. So really the idea behind the book and the topics we're going to cover today is to enable young people to make informed decisions. We want them to make informed decisions, but we don't necessarily give the information they need to do that. And for all of you who likely have, some of you have kids of your own, this I suspect would be of benefit to them, but also the youth you're working with will benefit from this information. And the idea here is prevention. Yes, there is some intervention techniques in the book, but most of the book is trying to prevent these things from happening to you. And if you see them happening to somebody else, how can you help in a safe way? So quickly, actually tomorrow morning at 8:30, my presentation is entirely about all the topics in the book, a little overview of all the topics in the book. But here's what's in the book. And this is getting cut off a bit, but let me see if I can adjust it. The first chapter is, all right, it'll be fine. Your rights with the police, and you probably don't know them. The second is safer police interactions. Notice how I call it safer, not safe, because there are plenty of people, particularly people of color, who do not believe they can have a safe police interaction. So it's called safer police interactions, street safety, situational awareness, and the like. Where we're going to be spending our time is part 2, sexual assault and consent. That's not a topic, but we can talk about it tomorrow or any questions today. Sexual harassment at school, online sexual blackmail, sextortion, and dating violence. Part 3 is about your digital footprint and digital citizenship, digital data privacy, cyberbullying, and smartphone cameras. That's a biggie. We all know those smartphone cameras in their pockets can cause all sorts of trouble. Now, let me just be clear. I'm not here selling books. I didn't love all my books. If you want the book, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you want to buy books. You can probably, if you click it today, you probably have it for it today, you'll probably have it tomorrow. So again, I apologize, but lugging around my book is a lot. You know, I made it look really strong, but the book is pretty heavy as well, especially when you stack them up. Okay, I built in time for some questions. Some of our topics, pretty heavy-duty stuff, so I just want to give the trigger warning related to those. And obviously, I'm not here as your lawyer. I'm not here on behalf of the city. I'm sharing information from my book. All right, let's start by talking about dating violence. 1 in 3, numbers that don't seem like any big deal, but they are. Because 1 in 3 adolescents, 1 in 3 minors is going to be a victim of sexual, physical, or verbal dating violence. Now, my source here is loveisrespect.org. If you go in there, they'll cite all the studies. Too much text for here. But let's just assume those studies are a bit off. Maybe it's not 1 in 3. Maybe it's 1 in 6. Maybe it's 1 in 10. That is a lot of people. That is a lot of minors who are in a violent relationship. Now, you may not be able to read this, so I'll read it to you. No one thinks they'll be in an abusive relationship, since that is something that happens to other people. I talk about every topic in my book. I am extremely busy between my work life, my family life, and the speaking I do. And this is the one topic that I don't know why. People just don't think it's ever going to happen to them. And I'm not saying it will, but it's going to happen to some people. And there's just a certain connect between dating violence that people don't recognize. Now, it is such a big issue. It is of such national concern that February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. February, we are trying to spread the word about what is happening in these young relationships. We also have October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So what's the difference? Why do we have 2 different months? They are extremely similar. But folks in a domestic violent relationship are probably living together or maybe married, may have joint bank accounts, may have kids, and so on and so forth. So the violence is similar, if not identical. It's just that the teens probably don't have, or most of the time won't have, those circumstances. Now, again, you probably can't read that, so let me just, she's me walking across the street. Abusers want power and control. So let's just quickly define dating violence, because there actually is a widely spread definition that is used by academics. I think you all know I'm not an academic. But this is what they use: a pattern of violence, intimidation, manipulation to gain power and control. I've highlighted some of those words in pink because they're the most important to understand. A pattern, obviously, this is not a one-time act. An abusive relationship is recurring. And the focus, the aggressor, the abuser, they want power and control. They want to control what their partner does, who they see, when they do it, and so on. It is about power and control. This is Lauren Ashley and Nathaniel Fujita. They were teenage sweethearts. For all intents and purposes, they had a wonderful, loving relationship. In senior year, she wanted to break up, and Nathaniel had a breakdown, and a couple months after they broke up, Nathaniel's mom called Lauren and said, "Hey, you gotta please come talk to my son, he's a mess." And she went over there and tragically strangled and killed her. And I use this example, there are countless others. Because we're going to hear from Lauren's mom, Mary, in a moment. And some of the things she has or had to say about this topic are very illuminating for many of us. So here's Mary Dunn, Lauren's mom. And actually, we don't have sound in this room, so I'm going to use my microphone.
A lot of kids break up in the senior year, but this isn't how they end. And I've never even heard that term before. And now even a more specific term called breakup violence. Your chances of being violently assaulted just shoot up dramatically at the time around the breakup. These are facts that I'm learning that I just didn't know before.
So I hope everyone could hear that. So let's be clear. Mary Dunn is not responsible. She's not at fault for what happened to her daughter. What she's saying is that she didn't even know anything about teen dating violence. And why would she? Because 81% of parents don't believe that it's even an issue or know about it. That's just puppy love. That's just a little jealousy, young lovers sorting it out. And that may be true, but it also may be a violent relationship. So teen dating violence, who is at risk? Anyone. And that's the disconnect that I'm always feeling, not from you all, but I constantly feel from audiences. They're like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. That's not going to happen to my loved one. Statistically, it's not, but it might. And what does the abuser look like? Well, the abuser looks like this guy. We'll call him Paul. Looks like any other regular teenager walking the street, probably really polite and nice. You're not going to know someone's an abuser by simply looking or generally talking. But it's not just Paul. It can be Paula. Girls abuse as well. Okay, so both boys and girls abuse. But here's the difference. Well, there's probably many differences, but here's one of the big differences. Girls are much more likely to experience severe physical and sexual violence than boys are. So, types of violence in abusive relationships. I'm not going to read each one of these. I think you all can read them yourselves. But what I want to say about this slide, when I wrote my book and interviewing, victim survivors, experts, counselors, and so on and so forth, the thing that stuck with me, and there's probably 3 or 4 things when I recall those years writing my book that just stuck with me. And I'll probably share another one. But one of them was that so many survivors, over and over, whether it's literature I was reading, studies, interviews I was conducting, many of them said the same thing. My physical injuries healed, but the emotional injuries stayed a lifetime. Or that's what I struggle with. That's what's hard for me to get over. And the physical injuries are probably pretty easy to see, but not so much or necessarily the emotional injuries. So let's again hear from Mary Dunn.
Her mother Mary wishes she had seen the red flags. The signs, although I think they were there, were very, very soft. And
I can see them as teenage, behavior. And certainly there are things in retrospect that I would pay much more attention to.
So again, Larry's not to blame. Many of us could minimize the relationship. We're not seeing everything. But there are red flags, okay? In almost every abusive relationship, there are red flags. So it's on us, whether we're parents, dealing with teens, coming out of the juvenile system, hopefully trying to prevent them from going in, talking to their families, their schools, counselors, recognizing the red flags is the most important way that we can determine whether someone might be in a relationship. You, in an abusive relationship, you may not know for sure. We can't necessarily say for sure. People who are in abusive relationships, they may not think they're in an abusive relationship, right? They may sense it, but they may not even acknowledge they're in an abusive relationship. So I put a lot on this slide, and this is not an exhaustive list of red flags, but here are some of the very common red flags. Dropping out of activities once enjoyed. I used to love playing on the soccer team, but my partner says I have to spend the time with them, and it's taking me away from them. Okay. You see some power and control there. Okay. Does that mean it's an abusive relationship? Of course not. But let's look at what other red flags there might be. Personality changes, missing school, failing grades, extreme jealousy. Look, there's jealousy in many relationships. We're talking about extreme jealousy, about power and control, pressuring drug use for unwanted sex acts, preventing, discouraging isolation from family and friends. Again, the abuser wants their partner to themselves, do not want to share time. Feeling pressure to immediately respond to their partner. They get a text, and if they don't respond right, I can't talk to you right now. I got to respond right away. Well, you can't wait a minute, you just interrupted me. Oh, no. He or she's going to get pissed if I don't respond right away. That's a red flag. Also, unexplained injuries, intimidation, threats, particularly with weapons. And this thing in particular, and others, they often happen in front of other people. People who are paying attention can see these red flags, actually you're nervous. They never do anything right. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, he or she gets angry. He or she tells me I'm not good enough. He or she tells me to do it over. And insulting, demeaning, or shaming, particularly in front of others. And the number one red flag, if you looked at, is that coming from me? I don't think so. All right. So this, if you look at the literature, that's probably the most common red flag, which would be, again, trying to break up and the partner won't allow it. That is probably what is happening and can be recognized as a red flag most easily. And if you see something like that, and some of these others, you may be looking at an abusive relationship, and it could be your relationship. Okay, so again, this is a presentation I give to a lot of young people. And so, again, I use the word might, because it's pretty rare, not pretty rare, but it's not that common where someone's going to say, yep, I'm in an abusive relationship. So, first of all, sorry guys, that's a mic. Okay, so if a loved one might be in a relationship with you, if someone talks to you about the best thing, if someone's going to talk to you about an abusive relationship or describe what you think may be an abusive relationship. And again, it's not limited to physical injuries. The best thing you can do is not question their story, listen. When we mean well, but when we say, oh, I can't see her doing that, or I can't see him saying that, it's going to make the person talking to you probably not want to talk anymore. So the most important thing we can do is listen. Also, if you are in, again, this is primarily for teenagers, if teenagers in an abusive relationship, they are probably going to blame themselves for some of it. What did I do wrong? You know, why am I always, doing this? They get so angry at me, and that must be my fault. It's not their fault. And hopefully they won't question their own story. Never confronting the abuser is extremely important. That can lead to violence for the person confronting the abuser, and it may blow back on the victim in the relationship. And terribly important, the breakup is the most dangerous time in any abusive relationship. We saw it with Lauren and Nathaniel. We saw that breakup violence. And service providers, which I'll talk about in a moment, they can help a victim by giving them what's called a breakup plan. Used other terms, but essentially it's a roadmap for things they should do and not do to help avoid being the target of violence. And it's extremely important. If someone is going to leave an abusive relationship, it's extremely important that they have a breakup plan. And also, we can contact a service organization. Even as educators, even as people who work with families, any of us can contact a service organization. They're available 24/7, 365. And you could call and simply ask, a teenager just said these things to me. I think it may be red flags in an abusive relationship. What should I do? How do you suggest I move forward? They are trained providers, and they are always there. The largest service organization is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They have text numbers and emailing, and they're always available. They're always going to pick up, and you can call anonymously. You don't have to give any information or specifics that could identify you. It's very important. Now, if you forget the name, if you forget the number, that's okay. If you Google domestic violence, teenage dating violence, this will probably come up first. And then if we're going to be helping young people learn to recognize the signs of an unhealthy violent relationship, it's awfully important for them to know what the signs of a healthy intimate relationship are. Because too much of the time, young people are growing up in homes and they may not see those healthy, loving relationships on display. So they really may not know, which is not to excuse any sort of abuse, but it's an essential part of education, as far as I'm concerned. What makes up a healthy, intimate relationship? All right, so whenever I finish a session like this with young people, I will, I'll go around the room because, some of you may have known some of this, okay? But there was one thing I said, you're like, oh, I didn't know that. I'll remember that. And for others, what you take from this may be very different than what someone else takes. So I always if you're going to be teaching these things, if you want to use my book as a guide of sorts, I think it's really important to ask people, what's the one thing you learned? The most important thing, right? Because hopefully you learn more than one thing. And I like to have them share it so that people can hear what other people's one thing is. And one other thing I didn't mention regarding the book is that there are quizzes at the end of every chapter with an answer key in the back. So you just want to give people quizzes, give them the quizzes. There's places to write in the things you've learned. There's a resource guide. There's everything. But again, the book's floating around. If you want to look at it, go ahead. Okay, let's talk about sexual harassment, which is, you'll see how prevalent it is. of the 7th through 12th graders, how many experience, what percentage experience sexual harassment at school? And it's 48%. Okay? Now, let's just say the University of American Women got this number wrong, even though they're citing all sorts of data. Let's say it's 45%. Heck, let's say it's 40, 35%. Think about how many youth that is. It's crazy. The numbers are just mind-boggling. And let's not forget that it's happening in college too. The stat was just high school. It's happening in college too. And then from college, we all know what's happening, is going into the workforce, okay? And, you know, it doesn't start in the workforce. Sexual harassment starts in middle school, around middle school, and then it starts going up. So if we do not address these issues as early as possible, it creates greater problems for society.
Stories of sexual assault and harassment have been dominating the news. Research shows it starts early. A survey by the American Association of University Women found that nearly half of students in grades 7 through 12 have experienced some form of sexual harassment within the past school year. Most of the incidents were verbal, but the study's authors said physical abuse was far too common. 30% of the students reported being harassed electronically by text, email, Facebook, or other platforms. What's even more disturbing is that in one school year, 79% of all public schools reported 0 cases of sexual harassment, meaning many students are being harassed but not coming forward.
So think about that last part. 78%, again, give or take, of schools are saying there's no sexual harassment at their schools. So either they're not reporting accurately, or, like we heard, students aren't reporting. And there are lots of reasons why people don't report. I won't be believed, don't be seen as a snitch, and certainly many, many others. The definition of sexual harassment: unwelcome attention of a sexual nature. What's so important about this is that it's not up to the person who's engaging in the harassment to decide whether it's harassment. It is the recipient of the behavior who determines whether it's harassment. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, saying hello, someone can say it's harassment, right? That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is how it makes the recipient feel. That is sexual harassment. Now, we can't even get to the heart of the issues relating to sexual harassment if we don't break some myths. There are so many myths about sexual harassment. I could spend my whole time here talking about the myths. And I got news for you. You know, I talk to tons of adults and tons of teens. And it's just as often that the adults believe these myths as the young people, okay? Because I hear them from my friends too. What are you talking about? So I hear these things, and personally and professionally. So one myth: girls ask for how they dress. Nonsense. People dress in a way that makes them feel good, and it makes them feel comfortable. No one wants to be harassed. Not true. That's a myth. Okay. Most sexual harassment claims are made up. This is a very common myth. The reality is, the least likely thing a target of harassment is going to do is report it, okay? For many, many reasons. So, not true. Also, sometimes, you know, if we're being harassed, we're scared, we're nervous. We may laugh to try to diffuse the situation, or simply nervous about it, or scared. Other times, we were okay with it initially, but then we stopped being okay with it. And we were always allowed to not be okay with unwelcome attention of a sexual nature, and so it is always okay to want it to stop, even if you've laughed before. It's just flirting. This is total nonsense. Flirting is when two people feel good about the exchange, okay? It's not just one-sided and repeated, in which someone becomes uncomfortable. But this is the myth I hear the most, and it kind of pisses me off, honestly, because I hear this from Guys my age, okay, I'm 52 and I'm still hearing this. Not a lot, but I hear it. And what it is, you can't give anybody a compliment anymore. You can't tell them, you look nice today, because you're going to get fired for sexual harassment. That is not true. You can tell people they look nice. I like what you did with your hair. Well, no, I'm never going to hear that, so I don't have to worry about it. But you could tell somebody you like what they did with their hair. That's not sexual harassment. Now, if the next day you say, oh, that's a great dress you're wearing, and then the next day you say, wow, your legs are super, okay, you're getting into harassment territory, okay? A lot of this is common sense, but yes, you can give someone a compliment, and it is not harassment. So these 4 images display acts that could be sexual harassment. Girls to boys, boys to boys, girls to boys, boys to boy, girls to girls, boy and girl. Okay? So all these acts could be harassment. You know, you can kind of envision what's going on. And if these pictures look like bullying, that's intentional. Because sexual harassment is sexualized bullying. Sexual harassment is not a one-time act. Okay? It could be cruel, it could be mean, heck, it could be criminal, that one-time act. But sexual harassment continues over and over, so much so that it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for that student to gain the benefits of their education or to feel safe going to school. And here's some things, again, I don't want to read all these, you can read them yourselves, but here are some things that may be sexual harassment. If you have any questions about these, I'll take them at the end. But there are 3 forms of sexual harassment: verbal and written, physical, and visual. And except for physical, these can be done digitally. Now remember, you know, we're all living in a digital world. The young people are digital natives. So any of these things can amount to sexual harassment. We all know where at school sexual harassment happens. It can happen anywhere, including a school bus, including an athletic event related to the school. And I bring this up, the potential effects of sexual harassment, because, again, you may think these look like some of the effects of severe bullying and cyberbullying. They are. Severe sexual harassment is more or less identical to cyberbullying and bullying, and victims of sexual harassment, this is what they're reporting. This is what they're reporting they're going through in a school environment. Another thing I need, or is essential to point out, particularly to young people you may be educating, you may come in contact with, and you think you need to educate them a little bit about this, or for your own families, there is a difference between harassment and sexual assault. And I get this, I didn't used to have this slide in here, but I got so many questions. Well, what's the difference between assault and harassment? I thought I'd throw it in. Okay, sexual harassment, unwelcome attention of a sexual nature. Sexual assault, intentional contact without consent. Written, verbal, physical, or visual. Sexual harassment. Sexual assault is physical. Sexual harassment, we've covered that, is a repeated act. And sexual assault is a single act. Now, that single act could be repeated, we know that, but sexual assault is a single act. Sexual harassment, another question I get all the time, can you get arrested for sexual harassment? Most of the time, you can't. Most of the time, it's not a crime that can get you arrested. You can get thrown out of school, you can get sued for money, maybe an injunction, but there are some exceptions. Street harassment can be a crime. Also, if you're dealing with somebody, a young person, who is in a severe sexual harassment situation, they may also be being stalked. They may also be in a dating violent relationship. Those things may in fact be happening, and of course we know sexual assault is a crime. Now, if I want to put students to sleep, I'll spend like more than 60 seconds on this slide because it's about the law. And no one wants to hear about the law. I get it. But they all, in my opinion, they all should know about Title IX. okay? They all should know about this civil rights law. They should know it exists. It applies to any school that receives federal funding. And it doesn't just cover I'll take your question at the end, but please, you'll be my first question. It also includes, it's not just sexual harassment, it includes other ills like sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. Every school needs to have a Title IX coordinator. Every school that is bound by Title IX has to have a Title IX coordinator. And I hope if you're working directly or indirectly with schools, I hope they do, because they're bound by law to do that. Which doesn't mean they all will, but they are bound by law to do that. Interestingly, this is something else I really learned and I didn't know going into my book. Most harassers were harassed themselves. That's pretty wild to me. So it's this cycle of repeated harassment. And also, it is rare, at least the data shows us, it's rare for a sexual harassment situation is a misunderstanding because one person was sexually interested in the other. No. Most people engaging in harassment think they're being funny or simply it's not a big deal. Well, it's not funny and it can be a really big deal. So to targets of harassment and of course people you come in contact with, people who may need a little advice or where to turn, they're probably blaming themselves, similar to the dating violence situation. Okay, they're probably blaming themselves. You know, what was I wearing? What did I say? Why did I lead that person on? And again, boys experience harassment too. And it's not, I showed you in that image, it was student to student. Harassment can go from student to staff and from staff to student as well. Okay, so it's not their fault. And it makes us uncomfortable, even if we laughed before, it's always okay to have it stop. And witnesses too. You know, witnesses can make reports under Title IX. If there is a severe harassment situation, data has shown that it can be really upsetting and traumatic for witnesses. So witnesses can come forward as well. Also, it should be optional. I know a school where I was teaching this past year, there was a sexual harassment situation. The student came up to me afterward and said, my teachers made me go ask the person to stop. What? They made you? That's a pretty bad practice as far as I'm concerned. Now, can it be helpful if the target of the harassment is comfortable asking the person to stop? It can be a pretty effective way to get it to stop. Because again, most people engaging in this activity think they're being funny, don't think it's a big deal, don't see themselves as harassers. So if the target is comfortable, they can write something digitally or on a piece of paper. We still do that anymore, I'm not sure. Or they can just walk up to them, hey, whatever they're comfortable saying, hey, that's harassment, it makes me uncomfortable, you need to stop it. Something along those lines. And again, they can report it to school. Someone can report it anonymously, and every school, again, needs a Title IX coordinator. Now, or a trusted adult, obviously talking to a trusted adult. Now, like bullying, most harassment happens in front of other people. There is, of course, some sexual harassment that happens behind the scenes, but a lot of harassment happens in front of witnesses. Bullies like an audience, oftentimes harassers like an audience. So what should witnesses do? Well, there's a few things they can do. And again, I'm not talking, people can intervene as they see fit, whether it's a small joke or not. But what I'm really referring to is severe cases of harassment, where we know the target is in pain. They are suffering. They are confused. They are feeling alone. So I always encourage young people, and of course, all of you, if you see this going on, to say something. Not confrontational, you're not rescuing people, we're helping people who are targets, okay? And also, It could be something like, hey, to a friend, that's not funny, why are you saying that? You know, stop messing around. Or to the target, hey, don't listen to him or her, they don't know what they're talking about. But if you didn't say something at the time, afterwards can do wonders as well. The next day, a week later, whenever, saying something or writing something to the target that is supportive is incredibly valuable. Never underestimate the importance of a kind word. That was something else I learned that I took away from writing my book. Okay, so one of my things was that when I read stories of severe cyberbullying, severe sexual harassment, severe sextortion, which we're going to talk about in a moment, something that just stuck with me. When these targets, victims, were survivors were interviewed, how'd you turn the corner? What changed for you? So many times I read, someone said something nice to me. What? It's like, come on, that can't be true. I kept seeing it over and over. Someone said something supportive. A friend stood by my side. You know, a teacher stuck up for me. And so I really like to drive home the point. There's always a way to help. And it could just be a supportive word to somebody. And when they're suffering and they're feeling isolated and alone, that kind of word can go pretty far. And then the last thing I'll say on this topic is that as I deal with so many of these situations, at the schools I teach, when there's a good school policy that is written well, and is clear about what the school is going to do or not do, or what the responsibilities are for an investigation, it tends to go much more smoothly as these issues come up. I see plenty of school policies. I look at every school policy where I teach, and some of them are woefully inadequate. And it's like, well, when you have these situations and a target looks at what the school's supposed to do, there's no real guidance for them, and that's a problem. All right, so y'all can think right now about your one thing. I got to keep this moving. Let's talk about sextortion. This is online sexual blackmail with threats to expose sexual images of a target. How many of you know about sextortion? Okay, just a few, which is pretty normal. All right, here's a little video, lays out some aspects of sextortion.
Okay, so you do a thing. You sent a picture of yourself with no clothes on. Something you thought wouldn't be shared. And in a polite society, cats wear clothes, right? Anyway, seemed like a good idea at the time. But now things have gone wrong. Terribly wrong. Maybe you shared the picture with someone you loved and trusted, but after a while, things weren't so friendly. Or they said they'd help you become a star. They just wanted to use you. Or maybe you met someone online and they really seemed to understand you. But then it got weird. And it turned out to be someone totally different. Now the person you shared the pic with is demanding more and threatening to tell. That's sextortion. Yep, that's a thing. The perpetrator relies on you feeling ashamed and keeping quiet.
Starts with a nude. Okay? I have a whole other presentation on teens or anyone underage sending nudes and child pornography, which is not the correct term. In case you don't know, it's a child sexual abuse material, but call it child porn, and all the ways you can get in trouble. But sextortion is one of the things that can happen to people when they share nudes. And I'm going to walk you through a sextortion scenario in a moment. But I want to just give you some data from the Department of Justice, because whenever I talk about sextortion, I always ask for hands. 5% maybe 85%. And that's a problem. We all need to learn about sextortion and what it is. According to the Department of Justice, most important and fastest growing cyber threat to children. Also, more minor victims per offender than all other child sexual exploitation offenses. Next, the average age of a sextortion victim is 15 years old. Try to remember when you were 15. I mean, This is a serious crime of unspeakable brutality. So here are the ways sextortion happens. Not all the ways, but this is some of the most common ways. So it's a three-step process. First thing, the perpetrator is going to want an image or a video. It doesn't have to be a full nude, partial nude, anything that would make the person depicted feel awfully uncomfortable. Now here are some of the ways they get images. Now, catfishing, in case you don't know, is when someone goes online and creates a fake persona. So it could be Jonathan creating an account as a 15-year-old girl new to town and looking for friends. And then I'm going to lure someone into a trusting relationship. And both boys and girls are sextorted. Since this is a newer crime, the data is still coming in, the studies are still coming in. But one research study I saw just a couple weeks ago indicated that boys are being more sextorted than girls, but it happens to both. Okay, grooming is when, an adult creates this trusting relationship with a young person, and they rely on the adult, and then the adult asks for nude. Catfishing, again, is when you trick someone into sending you nude. They've never met you in person, but they think they know who you are. Threatening, hacking, knowingly. What I mean by knowingly is a consensual relationship, an intimate relationship in which nudes are exchanged. Okay, so once they have that image or video, then comes the threat. I'm going to expose that image that you sent me to everybody you know, your teachers, your employers, your parents, everyone you know, if you don't pay me. And this is typically what they want. They're looking for more images or videos. They want to meet their sexual activity. They want payment of money or stay or return to a relationship, an in-person relationship. So what does that mean? Wait, you want to break up with me? I have your nude. If you break up with me, I'm sending it to everybody. Okay? Or you've broken up with me. If you don't come back to our relationship, I'm sending your nude to everybody. What does all this tell us? The person depicted, the victim in the situation, trusted somebody. They trusted them. And their trust was broken. So, sextortion happens typically, except for hacking, or in some instances, someone hacks into your computer, you don't have a webcam cover, the computer's in your bedroom, and then someone sees you at your most intimate moment. Sextortion does happen that way. Most of the time, though, it's happening in relationships, an online relationship. In this, I don't know how well you can see it, but this is a perpetrator. He's an adult man, and he's posing as this cute teenage boy. And he's lured this young woman who's they've never met each other into disrobing, and then he's going to tell her, he's going to then make the threat. Also, with boys, people can be sextorted anyway, but one of the ways boys are commonly sextorted, they're on a video game platform. They're on a traditional social media platform. And someone, it could be another boy, it could be a girl, someone they find attractive says, you're so adorable, you're so cute, what's your name? Let's go to another place where we can have a private video chat. Whatever forum they use, always there's different technologies. So the person behind the screen, the woman or man, girl or boy, disrobes. And then they tell the boy, now it's your turn. He doesn't realize he's being recorded. And then the threat comes. And then again, in-person relationships, they're dating, and then there is going to be a breakup, or there has been a breakup. Now, of all the topics I teach on, and again, I teach on a lot of topics, and if you come to more of about the other chapters in my book, we can't always protect ourselves from everything. But there are some darn good ways we can protect ourselves from sextortion. And the most important way, don't send nudes or get naked online. Period, end of story. And I hope when I convey this to young people, it's not just sextortion, there's revenge porn. And there's when the nude that was just meant for you goes out to the whole high school or the whole middle school. But at the very least, we can protect ourselves from sextortion by not sending nudes or getting naked online. Even when we trust the people. It's one thing for me to trust you, hey, I'll lend you $20, you'll pay me back. It's another thing if I trust you with a nude. Think about the responsibilities of being a young person today, right? Once you hit send, it's gone for good. That's so much to wrap your head around. It's going to be out there for your whole life and beyond. So just remember, anyone can create a social media profile. No one polices those profiles. I can pretend to be anybody you want, and perpetrators of sextortion are really good at creating fake profiles. Really good. And in the book, I talk about ways you can kind of root some of those out. When we submit to demands, the demands are probably going to keep coming. Okay? There's going to be more demands. And also, there's never shame in asking for help. I told you, I was a troubled teen. I needed somebody to talk to. I really did. I didn't feel like I could talk to my parents, but I could have talked to my basketball coach. I could have talked to my best friend's dad, who I was very close with. I just didn't know. So it's so important that they find a trusted adult. There are resources online for sextortion victims. The best ones are the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a hotline, and the FBI. If there are a minor involved in a sextortion situation, that's where I'd send them. Okay? Can they go to a local police department? Sure. It's better to go here. Okay. All right, you got your one thing, maybe you're thinking it right now, or maybe you'll share it down the road. The last thing, and then I want to get to some questions. Whenever we're talking to young people about these things or similar things, I always like to remind them that I am living proof. They always ask me some questions about what I did, so they get a little insight. I'm living proof that we can get past our mistakes. I am living proof that there's no mistake that they can't overcome. So if I've talked about something, maybe they're worried about it because they may be involved in a situation like that. Find a trusted adult. Doesn't have to be the parent, I hope it is, but it doesn't have to be, because you can get past any of these mistakes. All right, so that's just a quick overview of those topics. There's so much more information out there, not just in my book, but in many other sources. Again, if you'll leave, I'm going to take questions in a sec, but if you'll leave those 10, you'll probably, if you go to Amazon or anywhere else, you could probably have my book delivered by the time you get home. Okay, so if you're so all right, so let me answer any questions you all have. I think you had one in the back.
I just wondered if you could elaborate more on the Title IX Education Amendment of 72.
And what?
The Title IX
Yeah.
Education Amendments.
Yeah.
Like what, can you just tell me
Okay.
more?
Yeah. So there's tons of information on Title IX in the book, in the sexual harassment chapter. To be totally candid, I know a fair amount of Title IX. It is so complicated how a school has to carry out a Title IX investigation, and the laws are changing, that I actually hired a lawyer to work with me on that chapter. So there's not a lot I can tell you without giving legal advice, and I'm loath to do that. But any school that receives federal funding needs to have a Title IX coordinator, and they need to post and share their Title IX policies.
Are they to share that policy and what they do in regards to that?
Yes.
With the victim and their family?
Yes, but it's before that. They need to share a policy, how they're going to conduct investigations, who to report it to, how to report it, a timeline. Even before someone comes forward, it should be posted and distributed in the student handbook, at the Title IX office. The Title IX coordinator should be identified in the handbook. So these are just the very basics. And if you have any questions, the Office of Civil Rights has all that stuff. No one has to reinvent the wheel. The Office of Civil Rights has it all there. You can just rip it.
But then there's in some states, I guess there would be no repercussions if the school didn't follow this procedure or this act.
No, there still would be, whether they post or not, they're still responsible. So the complaint.
Post or follow through with.
Both. But if the school did it, then the target of the harassment should go directly to the Office of Civil Rights, because you can make complaints there. And if the school doesn't do that, they risk losing their federal funding. That's the bottom line. If they take federal funding, they're bound by Title IX. And the other thing, when I teach at a private school, and they may not be bound by Title IX because they're not taking federal money, there's other laws in most states that prohibit sexual harassment in an educational environment.
This law that I'm speaking of here in Nebraska is like would almost supersede this act of 1972, to where you can't legally do anything to the school or its employees that act on behalf of somebody that is federally funded. You can't sue them for not following that procedure.
Yeah. I don't know the law, but I can tell you federal law trumps state law. You can't, again, it's superseded.
Okay. Yes.
Federal law supersedes state law. I can't tell you that. It never is. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you tweak your message when I won't say the victim, but the individual that's experiencing the harassment and the perpetrator is an adult when it comes to the in-school type of situation?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay. All right, so, actually, I gotta give away these 5 books, so I got one for you and one for you. You guys asked the questions. And I got 3 more if I get 3 more questions. There you
I'd love
go.
to chat with you more.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to all be here. And so, so the question is it a different discussion when it's an adult harassing a minor? You bet it is. Because that's when you may be getting into crimes, depending on what the laws in the state are. And if it's an adult employee, they're probably risking their job. And it really, at that point, so again, under Title IX, it applies both ways. A student can harass an employee can harass a student. Well, when it goes from an employee, adult, to a student, there may be other laws being triggered. And that's probably when you may want to make a report to the police, because it could be a lot more than that. Yes?
I wanted to add something. So if a student is basically being harassed in a school by their teacher or coach or whoever, and if it happens for like 2 or 3 times, and then the student didn't say anything for months, are they able to come back and, go to court for that, or like talk to somebody and then come back and be like, yes, you're accountable for your behavior?
Yes. So the question is, if the harassment stopped or was paused, thank you, can you always go back and report it? Absolutely. Well, not even except, but let's just straighten this out. When a school becomes aware of a violation of Title IX, or they may have their own sexual harassment policy. Now, sure, they may be more strict than Title IX, or if a school's not bound by Title IX, they should still have a written policy. But regardless, once they hear about it, they have to investigate. So they'll still they should still investigate it. And ultimately, if they found it to be meritorious, then the next question is the remedy. What's the remedy? So if it stopped, you may still be comfortable going to the class. Or they may say, you could have another gym teacher. Or if it's severe, maybe they take, maybe they fire or discipline that employee. But in short, it's never too late. The school has an obligation to investigate, but months later, they're going to ask you, okay, well, what's the remedy you want? And you may say, I'm okay, I just want it to never happen again. And that's cool. That's your project. Yes?
Do you know the percentage of teens that go through sextortion?
No, we don't know. And that's what's so scary. So what we know, there's data and there's studies, but you don't have the full picture with respect to the numbers. because so many victims don't come forward. Now, one of the stats I showed up there is that from the DOJ is that there are more youth targets and victims of sextortion than any other sex crime. So how do they know that? Because typically when a sextortionist is brought to justice, and they're not just in America, there are sextortion networks overseas in third world countries where literally, you can Google it, they set up a house, a makeshift house, a flop house, drop house, wherever, where they put in some computers that are internet connected. Their goal, these very low-income people, see how many people in North America you can sextort, and we'll give you a bonus for what you bring in. And so the only way they're able to bring these people to justice, one person reports it, and then when the FBI does the investigation, it is very, very common for them to find on that perpetrator's computer 50, 100, 150 victims. It is. I will also tell you, I cried 3 times when I wrote my book. Twice I cried because I was so frustrated. I want to slam my computer and give up. The other time I cried when I wrote this chapter. When I was reading these stories of these victims, these young people, it just breaks your heart. Yes, on the very end.
What would be a good resource for a parent that states that the child has been falsely accused of, harassment in school?
Yeah, well, what I always suggest, if someone is falsely accused, if you have the means to get a lawyer, it's always better to get a lawyer. Now, some people don't have the means, and you can fight it. And I don't want to give legal advice because I have to be very, very careful about that. But I'll just tell you what I tell my own sons. My sons are good kids, most of them. My youngest, he's a little precocious, and my wife says he gets it from me. Fine, I'll stand accused. To not talk until you have an adult there. Because what schools will commonly do is they'll bring in a student to talk without their parents. And then they're nervous and they start saying things and maybe they're not remembering things correctly. I tell my sons, if you get in trouble, shut your mouth, get me there, and then we will cooperate. I'm not going to help them escape justice. Let's find out what happened and how we're going to respond. Because I certainly don't want you making your situation worse by what you said. Yes? Yes, go ahead, yeah.
This is something very personal.
Yes.
So it's a little bit hard for me. But I went through violence.
I'm sorry.
I was younger and I got married that time. So I was crying a little bit here because they really touched my heart. All the things that you said are true. Many years I was feeling I'm exaggerating. It's my fault. It's because the way I am. But unfortunately nobody told me. I saw the red flags, but I thought they were fine. It's because he loved me. It's because, unfortunately, it got up to the point that he tried to show me. And that's why I decided thank God I'm still alive. But I have to go through that point, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
To decide to get divorced, So we have to always prevent this with your own kids.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I can only imagine how painful it is.
And I apologize, I don't want to do that.
And again, what you just said, and you can question if it was abuse. You may not know, but you'll see and feel the red flags. Now, thank you very much for sharing that. That was very courageous. So, again, I have a whole discussion of the book tomorrow morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to stay for a few